heard it, bacteria are evolving and therefore resistance is increasing. And therefore, we need to make sure that we have tools to stay ahead of them. And those are, by and large, antibiotics. Now, when you look at the pipeline for antibiotics, it is not very strong. In fact, it was been described as insufficient. It's been described as weak. I would recognize the researchers who are here with us tonight and maybe online as well. There are a number of IFPMA member companies that are continuing to work, continuing to invest, dedicated scientists in developing the next generation of antibiotics to treat the resistant infections that we heard about from Amanda. But there aren't many of them. There are also some small biotech companies, and we'll hear from them as well on the panel. And there's also an important but small group of funders and public-private partnerships that are also contributing or working together in a way to make sure that we do have a pipeline of antibiotics that's coming through. But it's insufficient and recognized by most people to be so.
And when we're talking about that development pipeline, that takes time. And the pipeline is relatively long in terms of the need and the increasing urgency of this issue. And so while we're talking about the present, I know you and colleagues have done some very important modeling and have looked at historically what is the data telling us and how can we project that into the future to understand, and going back to sort of the costs of inaction, what is that trajectory if we do develop and implement incentives and not, to understand how those two paths could potentially unfold?
Yeah, exactly. So we asked a couple of questions. First of all, we looked back to the last high-level meeting here 8 years ago in 2016, and we looked at all the antibiotics that were in the pipeline then and how they have, what's happened to them till now. And 10 were approved by regulatory authorities around the world, of which 2 were considered to be innovative antibiotics by the WHO criteria. So the question is that good or bad as a historical view? And that's one question to be discussed. What we then did, and this is the report you have on your desk, is to map it forward and say, over the next 10 years, what do we expect to happen in the pipeline? And as you say, Alison, we considered that under 2 different scenarios. The first scenario is we just keep going as we are. The declaration that and the other meetings that are taking place this year don't result in any meaningful change in terms of the economics of investing into R&D. And therefore, what you expect to see is that the pipeline continues its current trajectory and it's a gradual decline. And so we predict that, and this is working with an expert data analytics group called Affinity, we predict that only 6 treatments will be approved by 2033 without any changes. Now, that is not many. And by that point, the pipeline will be a lot slimmer than today. On the other hand, the second scenario we did was to say if incentives are introduced by governments around the world, maybe as a result of the meeting in September, maybe as a result of the other important meetings going on this year with the G7, the G20, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is holding an important meeting in November. As a result of all of that, you could imagine a positive scenario, and that is that other governments will introduce incentives. And so what happens then? So that's the second projection that we did, which you can see on page 7, if you want. And what that shows is that this can be turned around, right? Now, it's not instant. As we know, developing drugs takes time and dedication and patience, as well as investment. But our modeling shows that with incentives being introduced, you would start to see that turnaround happening relatively quickly, and by 2033, you'd see a very meaningful difference.
I encourage you all to dig into that report. It's hot off the presses. And for those of you online as well, you should be able to find a link on the bottom of your screen as well to that. So I do welcome all of you to dive into the data and the details, because the modeling is really impressive and important and is telling a story. And when you're talking about the conversations that have been had, the meetings at the G7 and elsewhere, what are some of the key sticking points and the barriers to the implementation of incentives? What hurdles do we need to get over?
It's a great question, because as we already heard, actually the UK has done it. So it's shown a novel mechanism. It is the subscription model. We will hear more about it in the next panel. But essentially, it's been you could say, a proof of concept. There are some other discussions underway. There's a pilot that's being proposed in Canada. We're very hopeful, which will be an adapted version of what the UK's done. So to that extent, it's a good question of why is it not happening elsewhere? I think it is as a result of the political challenges that we all recognize. There are many, they're all difficult, and they mostly require governments to make choices over where they're investing. Now, so my hope for the opportunity that we have in September really is that that will help build the political will to encourage the other governments to go ahead and implement it as well.
Do you see any specific catalysts to that happening?
I see about 150 of them, and I hope there's another 300 or so online. Yeah, I mean, that's a serious point. I think many of us here in the room are talking to the governments that need to, that will be part of the declaration. We have a co-facilitator here who will be, helping organize that declaration. And so I think we should all be catalysts. As we just heard from Amanda, infections happen to all of us, and we all hope that they can be treated. When they can't, it gets bad really fast. And so this is a personal thing we should all be worried about for ourselves, our parents, our children, etc. And so I believe we all need to be catalysts.
It's a call to action for sure for all of us, and the clear differentiated roles that everyone has to play. I think that's another opportunity about this convening tonight, and also those that are forthcoming. And the meeting tomorrow, which is a multi-stakeholder convening and a hearing, recognizing it takes everyone who are coming from various disciplines and who are able to design the policies, the incentives, finance, and also those who are on the front lines and the workers who are actually seeing how this is playing out every day. So I appreciate your leadership and your partnership in this with us. I think we as foreign policy also have a responsibility and role to play in elevating these issues for our audience. We are all learning the impacts and ways that we can continue to communicate with research and fact-based evidence how everyone can get involved and the cost of inaction if we don't. So thank you very much for your partnership.
Next, please welcome to the stage Combating Antibiotic-Resistant Bacteria Biopharmaceutical Accelerators Chief of External Affairs, Damiano Di Felice, Fair Bio CEO and President,